The trial of Xylox. The courtroom was silent, except for the heavy chains clanking against the cold floor. Xylox, the last surviving commander of the defeated Zurich Empire, stood tall, his 4 arms shackled together. His red reptilian eyes scanned the room, filled with humans who had every reason to hate him. This was no ordinary trial. This was a public execution. A high-ranking officer, General Harris, stood from his chair. He glared at Xylox with cold, hard eyes. "Xylox of the Zurich," he announced, his voice echoing in the steel-walled chamber. "You are guilty of war crimes against humanity. You led the invasion of Colony 47. You gave the orders to burn our cities, to kill our people." The crowd murmured in anger. Some clenched their fists. Others whispered curses under their breath. Xylox did not flinch. He knew this was coming. The war was over. His people had lost. General Harris continued, "By the laws of the United Earth Federation, you are sentenced to death." The crowd erupted in cheers. Justice. Revenge. Victory. Xylox took a deep breath. He had fought against humans for years. He had seen them as weak, emotional creatures. But now, standing in their courtroom, waiting for his end, he saw something else. Rage. Pain. Loss. A soldier, dressed in black armor, walked forward, carrying a plasma pistol. The execution was to be immediate. Simple. Quick. Xylox closed his eyes. This is it. But then, bang. The heavy doors burst open. A man, dressed in a dark military uniform, walked in with purpose. His face was scared, his eyes sharp. He was no ordinary officer. He was Captain Elias Grant, one of Earth's most decorated war heroes. The room fell silent. Even General Harris frowned. "Captain Grant, what is the meaning of this?" Elias stepped forward, his boots clicking against the floor. He glanced at Xylox, then turned to the general. "Stop the execution," he said. Gasps filled the room. The soldier holding the pistol hesitated. General Harris narrowed his eyes. "On what grounds?" Elias took a deep breath. "I invoke Protocol 17. A wave of confusion spread through the courtroom. People exchanged glances. Even the judge, an old woman with tired eyes, raised an eyebrow. Harris clenched his fists. "That's impossible." Protocol 17 was. "It's still active," Elias interrupted. "And according to the law, if Protocol 17 is invoked, this prisoner gets a chance to prove his worth." Xylox opened his eyes. He did not know what this Protocol 17 was, but he could feel the energy in the room shift. Fear, uncertainty, suspense. Harris slammed his fist on the table. "You can't be serious, Elias. This alien is a war criminal." Elias didn't back down. "And you think executing him will change the past? Will it bring back our dead?" "No. But if we use him, he might just help us save humanity." Silence. The judge cleared her throat. "Captain Grant, explain yourself." Elias turned to the crowd. His voice was calm but firm. "The Zurich were brutal. Yes. But there is a reason they fought so hard. They weren't just trying to conquer us." He paused. "They were running from something worse." The room went still. "What do you mean?" someone asked. Elias took a step closer to Xylox. "Tell them, Commander. Tell them about the Dravak." Xylox's breath hitched. He had not expected this. The Dravak, a nightmare race, killers of worlds. The humans thought they had won the war, but they didn't realize they had just made themselves the next target. Xylox looked into Elias's eyes. The human knew. Somehow he knew. The executioner lowered his pistol. The crowd whispered in confusion. General Harris clenched his jaw. The judge leaned forward. "Is this true?" she asked Xylox. For the first time, Xylox spoke. "Yes," he said, his deep voice echoing in the chamber. "And if you kill me, you will all die next." Gasps. Fear. The humans had thought they were safe. Now, doubt spread through the room like wildfire. Elias nodded. That's why we need him. Protocol 17 gives condemned prisoners one chance. One impossible mission. If they succeed, they earn their freedom. He looked around. I'm offering Psylocke that chance. Harris slammed his hands on the table. You can't be serious. I am, Elias said, his voice like steel. And if we don't use him, humanity may not live to regret it. The judge closed her eyes, thinking. The room was tense. Psylocke could feel the weight of a decision that could change the fate of two species. Finally, the judge opened her eyes. The court will deliberate. Psylocke let out a slow breath. He was supposed to die today. But now he had a chance. A chance to live. A chance to fight again. And perhaps a chance to change everything. The impossible law. The air inside the courtroom was thick with tension. Psylocke could hear the humans whispering among themselves. The execution had been moments away, but now everything had changed. Protocol 17. The words hung in the air like a phantom. Something ancient and powerful. Something that even the humans themselves seemed unsure about. Elias Grant stood tall, his presence commanding attention. The court will deliberate. He scoffed, shaking his head. We don't have time for deliberation. The Dravak are coming. General Harris glared at him. And you expect us to trust Azuric? The same creatures that slaughtered our colonies. Psylocke remained silent, watching. These humans were unpredictable. Their rage, their grief, their sense of justice. It was different from the cold efficiency of the Zurich Empire. If it were the other way around, if a human prisoner had been standing trial in a Zurich court, there would be no debate, no hesitation, only execution. But humans questioned everything. The judge tapped a finger against the desk. Captain Grant, she said, her voice tired but firm. Explain why Protocol 17 applies here. Elias nodded. The law is clear. Any condemned enemy combatant can be granted a final chance at redemption by undertaking a mission deemed impossible by human standards. If they succeed, they earn their freedom. If they fail, they die. The room fell silent. The law was real, but it had never been used before. It was a desperate measure, a relic from the old wars when Earth had first expanded into the stars and had nearly been wiped out by alien invaders. General Harris crossed his arms. And you think this alien deserves such a chance? Elias turned to Psylocke, his sharp blue eyes locking onto the Zurich's reptilian gaze. It's not about what he deserves. It's about what he knows. Psylocke remained still. Elias took a step closer, lowering his voice. You and I both know the truth, Commander. The Dravak will erase humanity just as they erased your people. The Zurich Empire wasn't just fighting for conquest. You were fighting to survive. Psylocke's jaw clenched. This human, he knew. The Dravak weren't just another enemy. They were something far worse. They didn't take prisoners. They didn't conquer planets. They consumed them. And now, with the Zurich Empire gone, humanity was next. The judge leaned forward. Captain Grant, you claim the Dravak are coming. Where is your proof? Elias pulled a small holo-projector from his pocket. He pressed a button, and the air above the device shimmered, revealing an image. Gasps filled the room. The image showed a burning planet, its surface cracked and lifeless, massive structures floating in orbit, pulling resources from the destroyed world. Dravak ships. This was Zurich Prime, Elias said. We intercepted these images from deep space probes. The Dravak didn't just conquer your enemies. They obliterated them. Psylocke exhaled slowly. So, humanity knew. At least part of it. The humans stared at the image in horror. They had won their war against the Zurich, but they had no idea what was lurking in the darkness beyond. General Harris narrowed his eyes. And what exactly do you want to do about it, Elias? Elias's expression was grim. We have one chance, one shot at survival. The Dravak are not unstoppable, but we don't have the knowledge to fight them. He does. He gestured at Silox. Harris shook his head. You're insane. Elias turned to the judge. We don't have a choice. The judge studied the image in silence. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she sighed. Commander Silox, she said, addressing the alien for the first time since the trial began. What do you have to say about this? Silox raised his gaze. The room was watching him, waiting. Slowly, he stepped forward, the chains around his arms clinking. I fought against the Dravak, he said, his voice deep and steady. I know how they think, how they kill, how they consume. His red eyes glowed slightly under the harsh courtroom lights. You believe that you won the war against my people. He let out a low chuckle, one without humor. You are wrong. You did not defeat us. We were already dying. The humans shifted uncomfortably. The Zurich were powerful, yes. We crushed worlds. We enslaved species. We fought because we believed in dominance, but even we were afraid of the Dravak. He looked directly at Elias. You are right, Captain. They are coming. The judge's face hardened. And if we let you live, what will you do? Silox exhaled. I will help you fight them. Silence. Then General Harris scoffed. And we're just supposed to trust you. Silox turned to him. No, you shouldn't. But ask yourself this. Do you have a better option? Another tense pause. The judge glanced at Elias, then back at Silox. Finally, she spoke. Protocol 17 is granted. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the room. Elias nodded, satisfied. Harris looked furious. You're making a mistake. No, the judge said. We are making a gamble. She turned back to Silox. Your execution is suspended, she declared. You will be placed under strict military watch and assigned to Captain Grant's team. You will assist in this mission. If you succeed, you will have your freedom. Silox's jaw tightened. Freedom. He had never thought he would live to hear that word again. Elias stepped forward and removed a small control device from his belt. He pressed a button, and with a sharp click, the restraints around Silox's arms unlocked. The room watched as Silox rubbed his wrists, staring at the human who had just saved his life. Elias smirked. Congratulations, Commander. You just got yourself a second chance. Silox exhaled, then nodded once. He was alive. For now. But the war was only beginning. The real enemy. Silox sat in the dimly lit cell, his red reptilian eyes watching the human soldiers standing guard outside. Though his chains had been removed, the walls around him spoke a different truth. He was not free. Not yet. He could hear them whispering. Murderer. Butcher. War criminal. The humans hated him. He understood that. He had once felt the same way about them. During the war, he had seen them as nothing more than a nuisance, an inferior species standing in the way of the Zurich Empire's dominance. Now he saw things differently. Now they were his only hope. The door to his cell hissed open, and Captain Elias Grant stepped inside. His uniform was crisp, his expression unreadable. He carried a holo tablet, glowing with classified data. Get up, Elias ordered. Silox didn't move right away. Not even a polite greeting, Captain. Elias sighed. I didn't think war criminals cared much for pleasantries. Silox smirked but obeyed, rising to his full height. Though he was still weak from his time in captivity, he was still Zurich, still a warrior. And warriors didn't bow. Elias tapped the tablet, and a three-dimensional hologram flickered to life between them. It showed the Dravak fleet. Silox's expression darkened. The massive black ships, sharp as daggers, floated in space like silent predators. Their armor, made from a strange organic metal, seemed to pulse, as if the ships themselves were alive. The room around them dimmed as the holo display zoomed in on a single planet. Xylox recognized it instantly. Zerk Prime. Or at least, what was left of it. The once mighty Zerk homeworld, once teeming with life, now looked like a hollowed-out corpse. The Dravak had stripped it bare, devouring every resource, every living thing. The surface was cracked, blackened. Massive Dravak machines hovered above, harvesting the last remnants of Zerk technology. It was a graveyard. Elias watched Xylox carefully. You fought to protect your people, and now your people are gone. His voice was cold but not without a trace of understanding. The Dravak erased them from existence, just like they will erase us unless we stop them. Xylox exhaled, a deep, slow breath. Your people have no idea what's coming. Then educate us, Elias said. Xylox studied the image for a long moment before turning to Elias. The Zerk called them the Unmakers, not conquerors, not invaders, destroyers. We didn't fight them to rule the galaxy. We fought them because we had no choice. Elias folded his arms. And you lost. Xylox's red eyes flickered. Yes, and if you make the same mistakes we did, so will you. Elias stepped forward. Then tell me, Commander, how do we stop them? The mission. The briefing room was filled with elite human soldiers, all handpicked for this mission. Their expressions were cold, their stares filled with distrust as Xylox entered alongside Elias. The Zerk commander could feel their hatred. He had led attacks on human colonies. He had ordered bombings, wiped out cities. He understood why they looked at him like they wanted him dead. Elias, ignoring the tension, activated the holoprojector in the center of the room. The image of a Dravak command vessel appeared. This is our target, Elias announced. The soldiers remained silent, their eyes shifting between their captain and the alien standing beside him. Elias continued. The Dravak do not function like other species. Their leadership is centralized in a system we don't fully understand. What we do know is that every invasion fleet is controlled by a single Hive Lord. He tapped the display, and the image zoomed in on a massive Dravak creature, a towering, grotesque being covered in pulsating black armor. The room tensed. This is our enemy. Elias looked at his team. If we kill it, we cripple their invasion force before it reaches Earth. One of the soldiers, a burly man named Private Ross, scoffed. And what exactly makes you think we can even get close enough to do that? Elias turned to Xylox. Because we have him. The room bristled. Xylox stepped forward. The Dravak do not think like you. They do not operate with fear or emotion. They are a collective, a hive, each mind connected to the whole. But their strength is also their weakness. He adjusted the holo display, zooming in on a small docking station on the Dravak command ship. This is a relay point, where all battlefield commands are processed before they reach the Hive Lord. If we infiltrate this station, we can override their systems, disrupt their link to the fleet, and kill the Hive Lord before they even know what's happening. Silence. Then Private Ross laughed bitterly. You expect us to trust him. He glared at Elias. This is the same bastard who led the attack on Colony 47. My brother died because of him. Xylox met Ross's glare without flinching. Your brother died because war demands blood. I lost thousands of my own soldiers in that battle. Ross stepped forward, fists clenched. And now we're supposed to fight with you. Elias cut in. You don't have to like him. You don't even have to respect him. But if we fail this mission, everyone on Earth dies. Silence again. Ross gritted his teeth but didn't argue further. Elias turned back to the team. We leave in 72 hours. Prepare yourselves. This mission will take us behind enemy lines. As the soldiers dispersed, Xylox remained still, watching them go. Elias glanced at him. You handled that better than I expected. Xylox exhaled. They will never trust me. Elias smirked. They don't have to. Xylox's gaze drifted to the image of the Dravak Hive Lord. He could almost feel its presence, as if the creature's mind was already watching him from across the stars. He had fought the Dravak before, and now he was going to do it again. Only this time, he would not be fighting alone. A deal with the devil. The engine hum of the Black Dagger, a stealth-class military transport, filled the confined space of the drop bay. The ship was old but reliable, its dark plating absorbing light as it drifted through the silent void of space. Inside, tension was thick, a silent war being fought in the eyes of every human soldier on board. Xylox could feel it. He sat alone in the corner, his reptilian arms crossed over his chest, the glow of his crimson eyes dim in the low light. Across from him, the human soldiers kept their distance, their fingers twitching near their weapons. None of them spoke to him. None of them trusted him. And Xylox understood why. Humans had every reason to hate him. He had fought against them, had killed them, had led a war that destroyed their cities and took their loved ones. Now he was supposed to fight for them. He let out a slow exhale, watching them whisper among themselves. Their leader, Private Ross, made no attempt to hide his contempt. Xylox could hear his words, low and sharp. He doesn't belong here. Another soldier, Corporal Diaz, nodded. The captain's crazy for bringing him. Ross's voice dropped lower, but Xylox still caught the edge of his words. The moment we don't need him, we put him down. Xylox smirked to himself. Humans and Zurich weren't so different after all. Footsteps echoed as Captain Elias Grant stepped into the bay, his presence cutting through the hostility like a blade. All right, listen up. His voice was calm but commanding. You don't have to like him. You don't have to work with him. But you will listen. The soldiers fell silent. Elias turned to Xylox. Tell them what we're up against. Xylox stood, his powerful frame casting a shadow across the metal walls. He walked to the center of the room, where a holotable flickered to life, projecting the Dravak command ship in vivid detail. This, Xylox said, pointing at the central structure, is where we strike. The image zoomed in, revealing the relay core, a pulsating organic structure housed deep within the enemy vessel. The Dravak do not operate like your kind, Xylox continued. They are a hive. Each soldier, each ship, is connected to the will of their hive lord, a creature of vast intelligence and power. If we take out this relay core, we sever their command link. Diaz frowned. And what happens then? Xylox's red eyes glowed slightly. Chaos. Ross scoffed. So we just waltz in and kill their leader. Xylox turned to him. No. You will distract their forces while I access the core. Ross stiffened. You? Xylox nodded. The relay core is made of bioorganic systems, tuned to react against foreign interfaces. A human would trigger its defenses immediately. But a Zurich. He let the words hang in the air. Private Ross stepped forward. You expect us to send you in alone? No. Elias cut in. He goes in with me. The room tensed. Ross clenched his jaw. Captain, you can't be serious. I am, Elias said. Xylox is the only one who knows how to get us inside. If we don't trust him, we might as well turn this ship around and prepare Earth for extinction. Ross opened his mouth, then shut it, his muscles tensing. He hated it. They all did. But they had no choice. Elias looked around. Any other objections? No one spoke. Good. Elias tapped a command into the holotable. The image of the Dravak ship vanished. We arrive in 3 hours, he said. Prepare for war. The infiltration begins. 3 hours later, Black Dagger slipped through the void like a phantom, its stealth plating absorbing the background radiation of deep space. The Dravak command vessel loomed ahead, its surface pulsing with a sickly, bioluminescent glow. The ship did not have windows. It had veins. The Dravak did not build ships. They grew them. Inside the transport, the team made final preparations. Silox adjusted the Zurich interface device on his wrist, an ancient relic from his fallen empire. He had used it before, to command warships, to lead attacks, to kill humans. Now he would use it to save them. The team stood in silence, fully armored, weapons ready. The atmosphere was suffocating. Then the drop bay doors opened, and the darkness of space swallowed them whole. They moved in silence, their suits absorbing sound as they drifted toward the enemy ship. Silox felt the familiar weightlessness of space travel, the way the stars stood still as he approached the monster before him. Then, contact. They landed against the outer hull, their magnetic boots latching onto the surface. Elias's voice crackled in Silox's earpiece. "We're in position. Find us a way inside." Silox pressed his palm against the hull. The Zurich interface on his wrist pulsed, sending a silent command through the biometal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a section of the hull peeled open like flesh splitting apart. The team tensed. Ross whispered, "What the hell?" Elias nodded to Silox. "You're up." Silox exhaled and stepped inside, the darkness swallowing him whole. Inside the hive, the corridors breathed. The walls shifted, expanding and contracting, as if the ship itself was alive. The team moved carefully, their weapons raised. The deeper they went, the more unnatural everything became. Shadows moved without sources, strange. Guttural whispers echoed from unseen corners. Ross gritted his teeth. "I hate this place." Silox remained silent. He had seen this before. He had barely survived it. Then, movement. A Dravik drone emerged from the darkness, its form a grotesque fusion of bone and metal. Its multiple eyes glowed red as it twitched unnaturally. It saw them. Then, it screamed. The sound wasn't just noise. It was a signal. The hive knew they were here. Elias raised his rifle. "Move. Now." Gunfire erupted. The Dravak had awakened. The mission had begun. The mission begins. The hive was awake. The moment the Dravik drone screamed, the entire ship shifted. The walls pulsed. The floor trembled, and a deep guttural sound vibrated through the corridors. A heartbeat. Silox knew what that meant. The ship wasn't just alert. It was alive. "Move." Elias barked, raising his rifle. The team sprinted forward as the drone lunged, its elongated claws slashing through the air. Ross was the first to fire, his plasma rounds tearing through the creature's exoskeleton. The drone let out a piercing screech as black, tar-like blood splattered against the walls. But killing one Dravak was never the problem. The real problem was what came next. The walls began to split apart, and from the darkness, more figures emerged. Dozens. No, hundreds. Dravak drones crawled out of the organic tunnels, their bodies twisting unnaturally, their glowing red eyes locked onto the intruders. Their mouths, filled with needle-like teeth, clicked in hunger. Ross cursed. "They're coming from everywhere." Elias didn't hesitate. Suppressive fire. Move towards the core. The corridor became a war zone. Plasma bolts and pulse rounds filled the air as the soldiers fought their way forward, but the Dravak didn't die easily. Their bodies absorbed damage, their wounds sealing almost instantly. One drone leaped from the ceiling, its claws aimed at Diaz's throat. Silox moved without thinking, his forearms grabbing the creature midair. He twisted, snapping its spine, then ripped off its head with a sickening crunch. Ross, witnessing this, hesitated for a moment, just a moment, before returning to the fight. They were running out of time. The longer they stayed here, the more the hive adapted. Silox turned to Elias. "We need to get to the core now." Elias nodded. "Agreed. We make a break for it." Ross, Diaz, hold the rear. The team pushed forward, cutting through the endless swarm of Dravak drones. The deeper they went, the more the walls changed. What had once looked like corridors now resembled veins. The ship's heartbeat grew louder, pounding like a war drum. And then they reached it. The relay core. The chamber was massive. An open space filled with pulsating, organic structures, thick tendrils connecting to the walls like a circulatory system. In the center stood the core, a grotesque sphere of shifting black and red flesh, pulsing with energy. And in front of it stood something far worse. A Dravak warden. It was twice the size of the drones, its elongated body encased in chitinous armor, its multiple glowing eyes locked onto them with inhuman intelligence. It didn't scream. It didn't attack. It simply watched. Elias raised his weapon. What the hell is that? Xylox tensed. A guardian. The hive's last defense before the core. The warden stepped forward, its clawed hands morphing into razor-sharp blades. It spoke. You do not belong. The voice was not a sound. It was inside their minds, vibrating in their skulls like a swarm of voices layered on top of each other. Diaz stumbled back. What the? You are insects. You are weak. You will be consumed. And then, it charged. Elias and Ross opened fire, but the plasma bolts bounced off its armor. The warden moved like liquid, shifting and reforming, dodging every attack with inhuman precision. Ross barely had time to react before the creature was on him. Its blade arm slashed. Ross dodged, but not fast enough. His side was torn open. Ross hit the ground, blood spraying across the floor. Diaz screamed, firing wildly, but the warden didn't stop. It raised its blade to finish Ross. But Xylox was faster. He lunged, tackling the warden away. They crashed into the wall, organic tendrils wrapping around them as they struggled. The warden lashed out, slicing deep into Xylox's shoulder. He gritted his teeth but didn't let go. Go! Xylox roared. Get to the core. Elias hesitated. Xylox. Now. Elias turned. There was no time to argue. Ross, bleeding but still alive, was pulled to his feet by Diaz. The team rushed toward the core, leaving Xylox locked in battle with the warden. The core breach. The core was alive. It twisted and shifted, reacting to their presence. It knew what they were trying to do. The air around it crackled with energy, and the ship itself began to scream. Elias pulled out a detonator charge. This is it. He pressed the charge against the core's surface. Cover me. Diaz fired at the tendrils, trying to stop them, burning them away with plasma rounds. The core shuddered, its pulsations growing erratic. Then, a warning pulse. The hive had realized what was happening. The walls began to collapse. Drones poured in from every direction, their screeches deafening. Too many. Diaz yelled. Elias gritted his teeth, just a little longer. Behind them, Xylox and the warden crashed through the wall. Xylox was bloodied, one of his arms hanging limply, but he was still standing. The warden, however, was finally wounded. Xylox roared, driving his claws into the creature's chest. The warden let out a psychic wail, its body collapsing into itself. For the first time, a Dravak bowled and died. Xylox turned to Elias, breathing heavily. Is it done? Elias slammed the final command into the detonator. The charge beeped. Now it is. The core convulsed. The entire ship shuddered. The hive's heartbeat stuttered, then stopped. Xylox felt it. The entire collective mind of the fleet blinked in confusion. They had cut off the Dravak's command link. Ross, still bleeding, gave a weak laugh. We did it. Elias grabbed his communicator. Black Dagger, we need extraction. Now. The ship began to collapse. They had seconds to escape. Xylox looked around at the collapsing hive, then back at the humans. He had never thought he would fight alongside them. And yet, as they ran toward their only chance of survival, something strange stirred in his chest. Hope, betrayal, and redemption. The hive was collapsing. Tunnels twisted in on themselves. Biometal walls splitting apart, releasing thick, black smoke. The deep, rhythmic heartbeat of the ship stuttered, then faltered, sending violent tremors through the corridors. The core was dead. The Dravik fleet had lost its mind. But there was no time to celebrate. Xylox ran alongside the humans, his four arms pumping as he dodged collapsing structures and falling debris. The ship was dying, and it wanted to take them with it. Behind them, the sound of thousands of Dravik drones filled the air, a mindless swarm, no longer receiving commands from their hive lord, but still driven by pure primal hunger. Elias's voice crackled in Xylox's earpiece. "Black Dagger, do you have us?" The reply came through, distorted by interference. "Captain, your signal's weak. Repeat, can't get a lock." Elias cursed under his breath. They were too deep inside the hive. They needed to reach the surface. "Move. Keep running." They sprinted through the winding, organic tunnels, twisting and shifting as if the ship was still trying to trap them inside. Ross stumbled, his side still bleeding, but he gritted his teeth and pushed forward. Diaz grabbed his arm, helping him along. Then, they reached the docking bay. A massive hangar lined with rows of organic Dravik vessels, their sleek, black forms half-grown into the floor. The Black Dagger was nowhere in sight. Elias activated his communicator again. "Black Dagger, we're at extraction point. Where the hell are you?" No response. Xylox felt a sinking feeling in his gut. Something was wrong. Then he heard it. A soft, mechanical click. He turned, too late. A gun pressed against his back. Betrayal. Private Ross stood behind him, plasma pistol aimed directly at Xylox's spine. His breathing was heavy, his uniform still soaked in blood. But his hand was steady. "You thought we'd really let you walk away, didn't you?" Ross whispered. Xylox didn't flinch. He had expected this. The other soldiers froze, their weapons still in their hands, but their eyes darting between Ross and Xylox. Diaz's voice was uncertain. "Ross, what the hell are you doing?" "What we should have done before we even left Earth," Ross snapped. His gaze burned with pure hatred. "This thing doesn't deserve to live. Not after what he did to us." Elias stepped forward, his hands up in a calming gesture. "Ross, we don't have time for this." Ross ignored him. His eyes were locked on Xylox. "You think saving us changes anything?" Ross spat. "You think helping us fight the Dravik wipes away all the people you killed?" Xylox's expression remained unreadable. "You're a monster," Ross continued. "And the moment we don't need you, you die." For a long moment, nobody moved. The ship shook violently, another section of the hive caving in behind them. The swarm was getting closer. Still, Ross didn't lower his weapon. Elias took a slow step forward. "You kill him, and you doom all of us." Ross's grip tightened. Then, a scream. It came from behind them. They turned, just in time to see a massive Dravik brute bursting through the collapsing walls. It was at least 3 times their size, its muscular, plated body glistening with dark fluid, its massive claws big enough to rip a human in half. It didn't attack like the drones. It charged, straight at Ross. There was no time to react, no time to dodge. Ross froze. Then, Xylox moved. In a blur of motion, he grabbed Ross and threw him aside, just as the Dravik brute's claws came crashing down. Xylox roared, meeting the brute head-on, his claws clashing against the beast's insectoid exoskeleton. The impact shook the entire hangar, sending shockwaves through the floor. Ross hit the ground hard, his weapon skidding across the floor. He gasped, realizing he would have been dead if Xylox hadn't moved. And now, Xylox was fighting for his life. The Dravik brute swung wildly, its massive arms smashing into the ground, sending debris flying. Xylox dodged, weaving between the attacks, looking for an opening. Elias shouted, "Cover him." Diaz and the other soldiers opened fire, their plasma rounds slamming into the brute's armored hide. The creature roared in pain, but not defeat. Then, Xylox struck. Using the brute's momentary distraction, he lunged, sinking his claws deep into its throat. The Dravak shrieked, its body convulsing violently. Xylox didn't stop. He twisted, using all his strength to rip through the creature's vital systems. With one final, horrific scream, the brute collapsed. Silence. Then the sound of Ross's heavy breathing. He looked up, staring at Xylox. Xylox, who had saved his life. The man who should have been his enemy. The one he had just tried to kill. Ross's gun was still in his hand. He could still pull the trigger. But he didn't. Instead, he slowly, shakily, lowered the weapon. Xylox didn't say a word. He simply turned, as if the betrayal hadn't mattered. As if he had already known it would happen. Elias exhaled. "Black Dagger, we need pickup now." Finally, the reply came. "We have you, Captain. Hang tight. Redemption." Minutes later, Black Dagger arrived. The ship's weapons tore through the remaining Dravak forces as the team rushed aboard. The moment the ramp sealed shut, they felt the jolt of acceleration as they escaped the dying hive. The view from the cockpit was breathtaking. The Dravak command ship collapsing in on itself, breaking apart into dead, floating debris. The mission was over. They had won. Elias turned to Ross, his voice low but firm. "You pulled a gun on your own team." Ross didn't look at him. His gaze was on Xylox. Finally, he spoke. "He saved me." Xylox glanced at him, but said nothing. Elias nodded. "That's twice now. Maybe next time, you'll return the favor." Ross swallowed but didn't argue. The air between them had changed. Xylox wasn't one of them. Not yet. But he wasn't just their enemy anymore, either. For the first time, he had earned something close to trust. And that was a start. The last stand. The Black Dagger soared through the vast darkness of space, leaving behind the ruins of the Dravak command ship. The team sat in the ship's hold, silent, exhausted, and battered. Xylox could still feel the vibrations of the dying hive in his bones. The final desperate screams of the Dravak had faded into the void, but he knew this was far from over. The mission had been a success. They had cut the head off the snake, but the body still twitched, and it was only a matter of time before the Dravak retaliated. Returned to Earth. The United Earth Federation's orbital defense station hung over the blue jewel of Earth, a massive structure bristling with weaponry and layers upon layers of security. The Black Dagger docked in the main hangar, greeted by ranks of human officers and armed guards. They were prepared for anything, especially for Xylox. The moment the ramp lowered, the soldiers aimed their weapons at him. "Hold your fire," Elias barked, stepping in front of Xylox. "He's with us." General Harris stood among the officers, his face twisted in barely contained anger. He had never approved of this mission. "You brought the enemy into our home," Harris growled. "And now you expect us to welcome him." Xylox felt the weight of human hatred pressing against him. Elias held firm. "The enemy isn't him, General. It's the Dravak. And thanks to him, we may have just bought humanity a fighting chance." The tension in the air was thick. The soldiers remained ready, fingers on the triggers. Then, the judge from the original trial stepped forward. "You invoked Protocol 17, she said, her gaze locked on Xylox. "And the law is clear. If the condemned completes the mission, they earn their freedom." The silence that followed was deafening. General Harris clenched his jaw. He wanted to fight it, to argue, to throw Xylox back into a cell. But the law was the law. Finally, the judge turned to Xylox. "You are no longer a prisoner." Xylox exhaled. For the first time since his capture, he stood without chains. He had fought for humans. And now, he was free. The Dravak's response. But freedom meant nothing if there was no future to live in. The victory was short-lived. Just days later, Earth's deep space satellites detected something massive moving beyond the edges of the solar system. A Dravak armada. Thousands of ships, larger than anything seen before. The attack on the hive had worked. But now, the full force of the Dravak was coming. This wasn't an invasion. It was eradication. General Harris stormed into the war room, slamming his fists on the table. This is exactly what I feared. They weren't going to leave us alone. You woke the beast. Elias leaned over the console, scanning the enemy fleet. No, they were always coming. We just forced them to move faster. A hologram of the Dravak fleet appeared before them, the scale monstrous, overwhelming. Weapons capable of cracking planets. Ships grown from the remains of their past victims. Earth's defenses were strong, but not strong enough. The Dravak would not stop until every human was either dead or harvested. The Federation's leaders argued, debated, shouted. Panic spread through the ranks. There was no strategy, no plan, just fear. Until Tylock stepped forward. "You will lose," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. The room fell silent. Tylock stared at the display of the Dravak fleet. "You cannot fight them in open battle. Your ships are too slow, too predictable. You will be overrun before your weapons even fire." Harris glared. "Then what do you suggest, alien?" Xylox's red eyes glowed. "You use the only advantage you have left." Elias turned to him. "Which is?" Xylox's gaze didn't waver. "Me. The final gamble." Psylocke stepped closer to the hologram, his sharp eyes scanning the enemy formations. "The Dravak think like a hive," he explained. "They assume that all their enemies will behave the same way. That's why they crushed the Zurich. That's why they've never been stopped." He turned to Elias. "But humans are different, unpredictable. And that is your greatest strength." Elias crossed his arms. "So what's the plan?" Thylox pointed at a single ship in the Dravak Armada, a vessel larger than all the others. "That is the prime vessel. It carries the next Hive Lord, the one who will replace the one we killed. It is the brain of the fleet." The realization hit Elias immediately. "If we destroy it, the fleet collapses," Xylox confirmed. "Just like before." Harris scoffed. "We barely survived the first mission. You expect us to infiltrate the heart of their entire armada?" Tylox nodded. "Yes." Another heavy silence. Then Elias grinned. "Well, I've heard worse plans. The last stand begins." Within hours, Earth's fleet was mobilized. Not for a direct fight, but for a single precision strike. The Black Dagger would lead a small elite team into the heart of the Dravak fleet, using stealth to slip through their defenses. Their target, the prime vessel. Their mission, kill the new Hive Lord before it awakens. Ross stood at the launch bay, his side still bandaged. He looked at Psylocke, hesitation in his eyes. Then, finally, he extended a hand. Psylocke stared at it for a long moment. Then, he shook it. "Try not to die this time," Ross muttered. Psylocke smirked. "The same to you, human." The countdown began. The ships roared to life. Earth's last hope was a former enemy leading a mission no one should survive. And yet, hope burned brighter than fear. As the Black Dagger launched, heading straight toward the enemy fleet, Psylocke looked out at the stars. He had started this war as a conqueror. Now he would end it as a warrior. For the first time, he wasn't fighting for survival. He was fighting for something greater. For humanity. For redemption. For a future. The last stand had begun.